So, welcome everyone to our AMA with 81 Monkeys with Stephane here. Um, so, how the AMA will work will be like just a short 30-minute presentation on what 81 Monkeys is, their origins, their work culture, about Stephane, and then we'll go right to the community's questions. So please don't hesitate to ask your question. Just write it down in event chat, and hopefully we'll have all the time we need to answer all of your questions. So if you find a question that you find that you think is the most interesting, don't hesitate to thumbs it up so that we can prioritize it. So, Stephane, hello. Welcome. Thank you so much for being with us.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm been really looking forward to this.
Cool. I'm so happy. So, let's start right off of just introduce yourself and 81 Monkeys, how you got there, all that jazz.
Yeah. So thank you, Catherine, and thanks to everybody who is taking time to join us today. It really means a lot to see all these people in the audience. So thank you so much. Yeah, I'm here really to share, 81 Monkeys, to share our studio and kind of what our team's really committed to in terms of our work in the game industry, and the contribution that we're sort of committed to giving. Myself, I started working in the game industry about, I think, 15, 16 years ago. Prior to that, I had sort of been a bit of an entrepreneur. I opened up a bar and grill when I was in my early 20s. And then I left there and I went to the corporate world and actually became a district manager at EB Games. And realized that my passion for leadership combined with my passion for video games was really where I thrived and just felt, the most successful. So that really had me shifted. I decided to go back to college and studied game development, and I got a job at a startup studio. I think I had job offers at some, AAA, and I actually thought that's where my career would go. But this small startup studio reached out to me, and having been, an entrepreneur in the past, I felt that maybe giving this startup was a good chance. And so I did that, and we grew to about 40 people.
Oh,
And
wow.
I actually tried to, I tried to quit at one point. This is actually a bit of a funny story. I think I'll share this with everyone here because I think it's quite relevant, because I really learned something big, which I think is what allowed me to transition into 81 Monkeys the way that I did. So the studio was called Blitzu Games. I believe they're still around in Vancouver. I think they're dramatically different than when I was there. I got hired to work on a role-playing game, like a sci-fi role-playing game. And that game ended up becoming called Planetoids Inc. And it was pretty fantastic, kind of mid-core role-playing game on Facebook at the time. And just loved working on it. It was so beautiful. And really made that game kind of my baby for a long time. And then the investors decided to drop it. They were like, okay, we're going to drop it. We're going to move on. And we were like just on the cusp of launching it. The
Oh,
few thousand
man.
people who had played it had like given us feedback, and they just loved it. It was so beautiful. It was pretty soul crushing to, you know, have that dropped. And then they said, hey, we're going to work on, social media is changing. There's lots more women on social media. We're going to make a game for women. And we want to make a game that's like a backyard party management sim. And I thought to myself, like, I just not really what I am interested in. Like, I didn't like, it's not why I came to video games. That's not the kind of game that I want to make. And so I started looking for another job while I was working on that. And I started working on the game, and I realized, actually, no, this game's really fun. Like, I'm actually really enjoying this game. And man, it turned into this really beautiful project. And, probably we were a few months away from launching, and the investor said, hey, we're dropping that game.
Again?
Yeah,
Oh my
social
god.
media is changing, and you know what we're going to do now? We're going to do casino games.
Oh
And then I was like, oh no,
no.
there's no, like, definitely, I'm definitely not working on a casino game. Like, I just find I'm not a fan of slot machines, and it just didn't appeal to me at all. So I actually started looking for another job. I got another job. I got a job as a lead mission designer on Prototype 2 at Radical Games in Vancouver. And I was really excited about this. Like, at the time, Radical was just a really exciting place to work. And so I gave my 2 weeks in, I signed the contract, and the CEO called me back and said, yeah, the investors want to keep you. We'll give you $20,000 more in salary. And I said, oh, that's really generous. Thank you. But no, this is about my career. It's not about the money. And he said, oh, I
Mhm.
appreciate that. I understand. And then he called me back about an hour later, and he said, I talked to the investors. They really want you to stay, Stephane. They're going to double your salary and make you lead game designer. And
Oh,
then I was like, oh crap.
whoa.
Like, now I really have to consider this, because I have a young family. I had a second child on the way, and that could really be transformative. So
Mhm.
I, and this is where this is a bit way longer of a story than I intended, but um, I I spoke to my wife, and then I asked the CEO. I said, "Can I talk to the investors directly?" And he said, "Yes." So I got on a call with him, and I basically just committed to them. I said, "The money's really generous, but I need to know that I'm coming to make a difference for this game, and that I'm going to be part of the reason why this game's a success." And because I knew if I went there for the money and I wasn't excited about the game, I knew that I would be not happy. And so one of the tools I knew that I had at my disposal was just like declaring, sort of to the world that, hey, I really want to be excited by this game. And so I did that with the investors. And long story short, we worked on that game, and it became one of the top 10 fastest growing games on Facebook. We got to 3 million monthly active users in our first 2 months of launching. I think it was making about $40,000 a day. And it was the highest reviewed social casino game in its genre on Facebook.
Holy
And it
moly.
turned out to be this huge success, and I'm super proud of it. And I learned so much. But the point of the whole story is, what I actually learned was that it doesn't matter what I work on. That's not what drives me and gets me out of bed. What drives me is the creative process and the people I work with. And that's actually what I'm passionate about. And so it was this kind of, I had this epiphany at some point working on that project. And I no longer had this longing to work on like a AAA game that I would love to play. I had this longing just to work with great people and a great culture. And I can't say they had a great culture. I think, like, we as individuals and my colleagues and coworkers, we worked hard to kind of create a dynamic, at least amongst ourselves, that we could thrive in. But yeah, so long story short, I then decided I was going to quit and I was going to move on. And I was about to get a job at a company called Game House. They were going to fly me and my family to Victoria, and we were going to move there. And it was like, I think I was game director was the job that I was applying for. And just before I signed that contract, somebody came to me and said, hey, Stephane, I have this game idea. I have a prototype for a board game. It's a player versus player Sudoku game. And do you think you could make it? And so I looked at it, and the old me would have been like, no way, I don't want to design a Sudoku game. Like, that's not exciting. Um, but having had the experience I had, I said, hey, I'm going to look at this. So I looked at it, and what I realized was there was a big opportunity here, because I could found my own studio and work on this game and eventually grow into making the games I want to make. So that's what happened. And I founded 81 Monkeys, and I started developing it, designing it, and making art all by myself in this tiny little room in my house, and slowly added team members. I added a few people from Blitzu Games that I'd worked with in the past, including our art director, Ryan Slemko, who's just amazing. Um, Probably one of the more prolific artists in Canada in terms of the sheer number of games that he's worked on, from everything from Spyro to Age of Empires, Lego stuff,
Wow.
just incredible. So, and then you fast forward to today, and now we have 9 team members at 81 Monkeys, and we really have managed to sort of, collectively create a culture and a company that really works for all of us as individuals. And that's some of what I like to share here today. The one last thing I'll share is, while all of this was going on, I was also working for an organization called the Gender Intelligence Group, um, which I don't often share this, but it was founded by my mother, and it's really her. She's the the biggest inspiration in my life. So any opportunity to support her and work with her, I always jumped at. And over the last 10 years or so, I developed myself into a workshop facilitator for her company. And um, what I do is share the data and science of differences from the standpoint of how does that impact performance. Why is differences so important to performance? Why is that the fuel that companies should seek when building teams? And I've had the privilege of speaking at some amazing conferences around the world and working with many really incredible companies. And during that time, I always kind of kept that separate from the game industry. And just over the last few years, I've decided that it doesn't work for me anymore. I really have to make this, you know, them go hand in hand with each other.
Hmm.
So that's one of the things I'm committed to. And recently I spoke at Women in Games, which was a huge, huge honor and a huge opportunity. Um, you know, they don't often bring male presenters or speakers, and I got to speak on a panel with some other amazing male leaders in the game industry, and it was extremely well received. So I was I'm very proud of that. That was a
Oh,
really
that's
long
amazing.
introduction. Are we out of time?
No, 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 it's perfect. I think you made like a good leeway for your company actually. So we can start by talking about what you're working on currently, maybe like how this organization that your mom founded influenced how you work. I know you mentioned that your company has 4-day work weeks. How do you think it impacted the work that you do? Yeah, we can go into that
Yeah.
direction.
So, well, actually, let me just say that we don't have 4-day work weeks. And I think you and I had a really briefly touched on this topic. Um, it's an
Oh, I
interesting thing
misunderstood. I
because 4-day work
apologize.
weeks, actually, I don't think that they're the most inclusive way to function
Mm,
for all team members. And so I actually don't think they're the way to go for game studios. And I'll talk about that in a moment because I mean, that's kind of a bit of a bomb to drop. Some people are like, "Oh my God, 4-day work weeks! I'd love to work there," and I totally understand that. I do think it's a step in the right direction, but I will
mm.
share that a bit more in a sec.
Yeah, yeah, no
Yeah.
problem.
So I'll start by sharing. So yeah, we're 81 Monkeys is really committed to supporting the individual, right? It's not about you don't look at the team and say how can I support the team. I mean, there's certain conversations where that's important, but you more look at the individual and you ask yourself what's working for this individual and what's not working for this individual. When I was at Blitzu Games, my second child was born, and I had only been there for about a year, I guess, at that point, and I didn't have any time off. So or maybe I'd been there for maybe I was in my second year and I'd already taken vacation time. I can't remember, but at any rate, I had the child and I said I wanted to stay home and I was willing to work from home. And they said, "Oh, we'll talk about it and get back to you." And they got back to me and they said, basically, you need to take your 5 sick days, and that's what we can give you. And it always just stuck with me, like that's the minimum, like that's the standard, that's the set out by the government here in BC. You give people 5 sick days and those sick days are paid, and you track those sick days to make sure that you're honoring that law. But that doesn't mean that that's the only thing you can give employees in situations like this. And I just felt that too many companies follow the like standards that are set out by, the industry or the local government or whatever. And they don't realize that it truly is completely up to us how we do things. And I'm someone who really prioritizes my time, or I like optimize my time. So what that means is that I really blend my work and life a lot. So I bring work home. I can't not think about it at home. Sometimes I work on the weekends, and sometimes I take time off during the week. And I feel most comfortable when I have freedom to do that. I don't like really working in a rigid structure, but some people do. Some people like to come to work and work from 9 a.m. to 5 a.m. and not bring the work home and not think about the work when they're home. And that's totally fine as well. But that's just an example of two, different individuals where one of those people will probably really thrive in a 4-day work week, where the other individual won't, because it puts more structure on those 4 days, and I realized I'm segued right back into the 4 day work week. But um, you yeah, so when you switch to 4 days, all of a sudden you have more pressure on the team members um, to be present those days and to manage their life around those 4 days. So if you have an appointment or a family emergency comes up, it becomes more difficult to take time off in those 4 days because they're giving you those 3 other days. And the expectation is that you use those 3 days to do the things that you have to do. And that actually can put pressure on certain people. It definitely would put pressure on me. Whereas at 81 Monkeys, when we identify that everybody works different, what we've done is we have no work week. So although majority of the time we work Monday to Friday, it means that, like, if somebody wants to take Thursday off because they want to go to the beach and they don't want to go to the beach when it's really busy, or they want to go to the park for a hike and they don't want to go to the park when it's really busy. I think everybody, depending on where you're from, you're probably had the experience during the pandemic where parks would just get so overfilled on
Hmm.
weekends because everybody works Monday to Friday and it's no fun to go there anymore. So yeah, having no work week means people can really work any day they want. There's an expectation that we work a certain amount of hours in a week, but um, how you do that's really up to you. Of course, you need to be professional, and you can't have it, impact the team. You need to be in communication and things like that. The other thing we do is we never work overtime, and that's not very progressive. I think that should be the minimum bar for any game studio, but we never work overtime. And we also have self-managed paid time off. So really what that means is we don't track sick days. We don't track vacation days. It's really up to the individual to manage that. And it's unlimited paid time off. And we've been doing this now for 4 years, and we've never had an issue. We had one employee really early on who certainly, I think, took advantage of it. But I don't blame them. I blame myself for not being clear on expectations because it is a difficult environment to work in, especially if you don't have a lot of professional experience. Um, so yeah, so I actually, I think that this type of work environment is actually more inclusive than a 4 day work week. Um,
Mm.
and I can see the challenges that bigger studios would have. Bigger studios tend to lean towards more structure, not less structure,
Yeah.
because it's difficult for HR departments to sort of figure out how to express those policies and make sure that um, people understand those expectations. We are committed to maintaining this as we grow. We are adding people to our team right now. We're hiring a for a pixel artist, uh, a developer, a senior developer, and hopefully a project manager. So we're going to be, I think in a month or two we'll be at 12 people, which is super exciting. But yeah, and I mean, obviously, when you talk about inclusion, we're not just talking about company policies. We're talking about how we relate to each other and how we communicate and the type of leadership we have. Um, and I want to say this. I think this is really important. Like, I don't know the experiences of everyone else. I don't, even though I'm been in that space and I've been working and facilitating workshops. I'm. That doesn't mean I understand everyone's experience, and I never would speak for someone else's experience. It means that I have a commitment to learn about other people's experiences, and I have a commitment to continue to reassess how we do things and to find opportunities to improve um, what we do. And I don't think we have it all figured out yet, but that's our commitment.
Yeah, that's okay, right? Like you just constantly ask questions and like, adapt to the times, basically. Thank you for sharing. It's very like having opinions about like the 4 day work week. Like your opinion kind of differs from like being so like strict on like yeah like 4 days exactly should be like the norm. Like I think it makes a lot of sense that like it's adaptable according to to the person, like to the individual, as opposed to as a like a group.
Yeah, yeah, it's challenging, and I think I think just we as an industry have still a lot to learn. I think one of the biggest challenges the game industry has faced or faces to this point is that when a lot of game studios and a lot of leaders that I talk to in the game industry, they come from a perspective of where we already got this figured out. We're already really progressive. And
Hmm.
but in reality, that's just not how it looks. You know, um, I think when you look at like retention rates for women, for instance, just as one specific category, you look at the retention rates, the hiring and retention rates for women as developers or women as artists or women as game designers, you'll see there's a big difference in um, just, obviously in the percentage of people working in those departments, but actually the turnover. And so um, I think there's lots of work to do. But I think the first thing we all need to acknowledge is that we don't have it figured out. And there's always more to learn. And what we should be focusing on is what our shared commitments are.
Yeah, totally. Nate,
That's
did you want to add something?
Yeah, that's awesome. The I 100% agree. I mean, we all should be very humble going into any situation and acknowledge that we don't have it all figured out. There's a heck of a lot, for us to learn, and that's not only meeting today's standards and best practices. It's discovering new ones, and I think an example of that would be the trend towards things like the 4-day work week, as well as your no work week, right? We're going to, uh, as employers, and as teams, we're going to be experimenting with a lot of these types of structures to then learn what does and doesn't work for us and identify new best practices, that come out of, these different experiments. And of course, we don't know, how to operate in these new models because we haven't experienced them before. So um, definitely, definitely need to be humble and be open to new learnings and improvements. And that's part of why we're here. Our mission, our stated mission here at Work with Indies is not just to serve job ads, right? It's to make indie games a better place to work, and that's acknowledging that even though there's some things that we like about indie games and working in indie games, that there's room for improvement, right? It's acknowledging that, and that's the first step in making improvements. Um, an answer, like a question, creates the space for new information, right? You have to be open to that new information before you can actually receive an answer to that question and that new information. So that's really awesome to hear. I
Thank
do
you, man.
have, before we get to the questions from the community, and we have a lot of them, I did want to drill down on one thing. So, Catherine was kind of alluding to this, wanting to better understand maybe how your experience as a workshop facilitator, and specifically around, you brought up the differences, differences, and I'm assuming that means differences in like the makeup of the team, the individuals on the team, and why that's really important to performance. So I'd love to hear more about that subject, your perspective there, and how that's been successfully implemented at 81 Monkeys. So even if you can give us a very specific example at 81 Monkeys, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say it's a very big topic. We could probably do 4 hours on this, or I could. But um, the way that the workshops are designed are really they're designed around a shared conversation, and one sort of aspect builds on the other. It's difficult to, a lot of these companies reach out to gender intelligence, and sometimes, like, I don't take on clients very often. They're very specific. I have like tattoos. I have knuckle tattoos. I'm not the typical person that facilitates. They have like Harvard, PhD people that facilitate workshops. Like they're doing workshops right now at NASA. They're not going to send this little game studio guy with tattoos to, talk to the people at NASA. That being said, like, I have spoken to rocket scientists before at a conference in Washington. I don't think I've ever been more nervous in my life, but it's yeah, it's certainly a complex topic, and but I will share an example. And so when I talk about the data and science, that's really what we focus on. Is we focus on like real research, and we stay away from the realm of, you know, concepts and opinions. We want to really have it be grounded for people so that they can actually see how it shows up. So a really good example, this is specifically around men and women, and this isn't about whether you believe there's biological differences or whether there's societal or they're learned differences. It actually doesn't matter in this context. But what Harvard and MIT did these studies, and some of you may be familiar with this, where they took dozens of students. I believe it was actually in the hundreds when it was all said and done, but they put them into groups. And the intention was they were going to give them these complex challenges, and then they were going to attempt to predict the odds of success. So if you're going to predict the odds of success of a team, you're going to look at various metrics that you have at your disposal or that you have access to. So since they were students at Harvard and MIT, they had things like average GPAs for the team, right? So they could look at the average GPA of all the teams, and then they could say, hey, if the team with the highest average GPA, they're probably going to do better than the other teams. That's not an unreasonable assumption. They also could look at the average IQ. So they literally had IQ metrics on these individuals. They would look at the average IQ of the team members, and then it's reasonable for someone to say, hey, if this team is full of the smartest people, they're probably going to do better at these challenging tasks. And I know we've all heard this term, like the best and the brightest. We only hire the best and the brightest, or whatever. There's a reason why, is because they believe that you can predict performance. And so one of the other things they looked at was gender balance. They looked at, because it was an easy thing to look at, right? They had some teams that are all female, and some teams that are all male, and some teams that have 70% male, 30% female, and some teams that were 50-50. And what they discovered was that there was no better predictor for success than gender balance. The average GPU wasn't as successful. Average IQ wasn't as successful. The most successful way to predict performance of these teams was gender balance. And the closer they got to 50-50, the more likely they were to succeed over the other teams. And if it went more towards female or more towards male, there would be a predictable drop-off in their success rates. And MIT coined this term back then, where they called it collective intelligence. And they said that collective intelligence goes up with the more differences you have on the team. And the gender balance was just one easy difference they could look at. There's a whole spectrum of differences, right? There's racial, there's cultural, there's neurological, there's just the experiences of individuals, the interests of individuals, even the way that people talk and communicate. You can identify differences in there. So that sort of was the catch-all term, was collective intelligence. And my mother, when she founded Gender Intelligence Group like 30 years ago, I think maybe over 30 years ago now, but she started calling it gender intelligence because from her standpoint, she felt that the most effective way to encourage diversity in teams and around the conversation of performance was to focus on the gender differences, because at the time it was kind of a hot topic, and she's written 5 books around that topic, but it's really gone so much further than that, where now it is just more a conversation about differences. Although we do show a lot of research on gender, we always go back to, it's not simply about gender differences, it's about individual differences and who they bring to the team. So how that shows up at 81 Monkeys, there was a moment where we had this opportunity to hire a new game designer. And some of my team members actually knew the individual who was reaching out to us, and they came to me with some concerns. They were concerned about this individual's communication style, and they were concerned about this individual's sort of personality. And I thought they were going to bring a tremendous amount of value, and I wanted to give them the chance. And this actually was going to end up being one of their first jobs in the industry. So when I say give them the chance, we really were. And so I brought them on, and sure enough, this person was disruptive. They're very loud and flamboyant, and most of the people in the team were really quiet and reserved, and there was some friction. But I kept going back to the thing that needed to be focused on with this individual was the results they were creating and how they were supporting the team. And so I would have conversations one-on-one with team members, and always come back to the, what we're committed to as a team. And this individual ended up being not only an extraordinary team member, and not only did they create extraordinary results, but everyone realized that they were filtering this person through their own, biases. And that when we as a team talk about those openly and honestly with each other, that we become more, we create space for differences to show up. And at the end of the day, what really I'm committed to is I want people to be able to be their authentic selves when they come to 81 Monkeys. And there's always, over the course of a day, there's always going to be situations, scenarios where people can't be themselves. They get shut down by somebody else, or the personalities conflict, or whatever it happens to be. But those moments don't dictate our experience at 81 Monkeys. We all, and I mean, this is something I check in with everybody regularly, but we all, move beyond those really fast, and we focus on how we impact each other and how we support each other in terms of being ourselves at work. So I know that's kind of really conceptual, and maybe doesn't, there probably are more questions about that. I'd be happy to dig into it more. But I think that just the easiest way to sort of express it is that, and this is a reflection of the no work week and the unlimited paid time off and the self-managed work style that we have, is I really want people to have that space to be themselves, to operate how they feel most comfortable. And I believe that by doing that and creating that space, I'm going to get the best results, or I shouldn't say we as a team are going to get the best results from that individual. But it's a conversation we have to have with each other ongoingly.
Awesome. There's so much good stuff in there. So many great insights. I love I don't love the fact that, um, it's a new data point that has to, nudge us to try to do the right thing. But the gender difference being a more appropriate metric to essentially target and try to optimize for than even things like GPA, right?
Yeah.
The, putting that graph, together and seeing some of those metrics side by side, I think would be really powerful, right?
Yeah, we do have a lot of this data visualized,
Yeah.
so, and maybe at some point, Nate, I can share that with you. I will share one thing really quickly. It's kind of ironic, but that individual I mentioned that we hired, they came up to me, and I said to them, I want to hire another game designer, and I want to find female candidates, was what I shared. And he said to me, just matter of factly, he's like, well, if you're just trying to find a female game designer, does that not mean you're not going to get the best candidate? Or does that not mean you're not looking for the best candidate if you're only looking for a female game designer? And I realized there's a bunch of landmines in there. I won't get into that.
Mm-hmm.
But I said to him, I'm like, I don't want the best candidate. I want the best team.
Right.
And it's like, that's just that clicked for him. And he's like, I understand. And he never brought it up again. Yeah, it's a different way of thinking of it. You think of it as the collective and the value that those differences bring. So
that's the quote. That's the quote for the
That's
tweet,
the
the
quote.
promotion. Yeah. I
Thank
don't
you
want the
so
best candidate. I
much.
want the best team.
Yeah. So
yes.
we are going to go to the community at this point. Shelby, could you start that up?
Yeah, that's a good question. In fact, I did plan to talk about, more about how we hire and what we look for, and even just what we consider to be leadership, or how that shows up in 81 Monkeys. But specifically to your question, we just got a round of funding, and which is super exciting for us, and it allows us to bring on more team members. We are currently looking for a portfolio that reflects the type of pixel art that we're working on. We actually are we actually this is just a secret among us. We are interested also in bringing on a junior pixel artist, so somebody whose portfolio doesn't necessarily reflect the work that we're doing, that maybe needs some, maybe needs some more support. But we currently are focused on more senior pixel artists. So it doesn't necessarily, it's not, seniority is not the right word. We're just looking for a portfolio and somebody that has, a fair bit of content that is in closer to the work that we're doing, so that we can bring them on and they can start sort of hitting the ground running. We have had a number of pixel artists join our Discord, and I was actually just talking to the team. In fact, I was actually just writing a message on Discord before I got on here to let people know. But we're going to open up a temporary channel, and we're going to share a pixel art like test that we made. I really don't like giving tests to, like I design tests or programming tests. Like I just don't like doing that. I just think it's a waste of the candidate's time. But that being said, having a pixel art test, it gives an opportunity for people whose portfolio doesn't reflect our work to demonstrate that work, that they can do this type of work. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to share it openly on our Discord, and we're going to share the test. Anybody can pick it up, and then they can share the results in the channel, and that way everybody can kind of support each other and share. But what my answer is, we're looking for someone who has a breadth of work that is close to the style that we're doing. So if your portfolio doesn't have the type of pixel art that we're doing, then we may not, reach out. However, we have been sending feedback to everybody that their portfolios don't show that. And the feedback we've been giving is, if this is the type of game you want to work on, then go and make some art that is in line with this and have that on your portfolio. I remember a student reach out to me. I guess they were like a recent graduate, and they said, I really want to work at EA here in BC. I want to work on the FIFA game. I'm a huge soccer fan. I'm a huge FIFA fan. I think I could be really great, and I want to be a UI artist for them. And I asked them, I said, have you ever done any UIs for FIFA? And they said no. And I said, listen, if you really want the job, go and download some FIFA screens and make changes to the UI and have that be in your portfolio. Share that with EA. And that's a really powerful way to, get a job, is to, put your work in a position where the hiring manager can look at it and say, oh, geez, I can see this person working here because the work that they have is, lines up with what we're doing. So we had a number of people apply for the pixel art position that didn't necessarily have any pixel art in their portfolio, even though they had really great art. It's a bit of a challenge for us to connect their abilities as a pixel artist with the non-pixel art artwork they have, even if it's really great. Now, I mean, I'm not an artist, so I shouldn't be talking too much about this. Our art director, Ryan, should. Ryan will look at art and he'll be like, oh, this person's super talented. They understand color, they understand mood and how to convey emotion. They understand animation. I think they could totally do pixel art really great. But even in that situation, because we're looking at 100 or so applicants, we already have 15 that have great pixel art, that there's just no value in adding that other person that doesn't have pixel art, even though they're a great artist. So yeah, that's my advice.
Great, thanks for that. Tristan actually had kind of a related question, and I think you've addressed it here. So it's really, you want a portfolio that has content that is relevant to the role, and
That's a better way
you
of
want to
putting
make
it.
it,
Yes.
yeah, you want to make it very easy for somebody to be able to visualize you being successful in the role, right? So
Yeah.
demonstrating some of that ability or some of that past success would be key. Key to something like that. What do you? Yeah, actually, just riffing off of what you mentioned. Um, I guess it reminded me because you were talking about UI specifically with FIFA, but we see design students, and like I'm a big fan of. I'm not a designer myself, but I'm a fan of it. So like I have a Dribble account and a Behance account, and I just love gawking at websites and magazine design and stuff like that. And everybody's portfolios when they come out of school or when they're first starting, and they don't have their professional work, they're just remixing, right? It's everybody has a Spotify,
Right.
right? They have their own interpretation of Netflix, right? And those would be obviously very powerful in applying for a Spotify or a Netflix, but they're equally as powerful in applying for related roles, right?
Yeah.
So Tristan asked, so what about unrelated, content? So Tristan asked specifically around becoming a game director, some stuff related to some of the work that they've done on D&D, for example. How how relevant, how effective is it to have kind of unrelated content in a portfolio? What's or when you're reviewing portfolios, like how do you best navigate through some of that content to get to the stuff that you're working for, and how can applicants kind of make your job easier?
Yeah, those are, I mean, that's a really great question. And I think there's a lot of insight there. It's challenging because you apply for a pixel art position and so there's a process, right? We basically do our best to honor everyone that emails us. Like, we're really grateful that somebody took the time to write this message and send this to us. Also, our time's limited, and we want to be mindful of that as well. So we open the email and we read the email. Ideally, the email has the cover letter written right into it, kind of succinctly, rather than having a cover letter attached. As an example, that kind of works for us. We get some insight into this individual, and we've had some really great worded emails. One in particular that I read that I was like, oh, this is great. This person's very transparent. They're really doing a good job of kind of connecting with us and what we're doing just in the language of this email. And that just gets us really interested. But regardless of what's in the email, the very next thing we do is click on the portfolio link. Or if it's a PDF, we will open the PDF. And what we hope to see when we click that link is related assets and artwork to the job that they're applying for. So sometimes we click on the link and we just don't see any pixel art. We have to scroll around a bit, maybe click on a few things, and then, oh, here's the pixel art, and then we can see it. It's challenging because I understand you have a website and you can't necessarily manage that, but some people have sent us a link, and when we open the link, it says portfolio for 81Monkeys. And I was like, wow, that's, they will have our name right there. That's so cool. And so, like, let's say you have a pixel art page, link to the pixel art page. Don't link to the homepage. Just send this is, you're applying for a pixel art position, send them right to the relevant assets on your website, because that kind of first, opinion. Then what we'll do, if we're really interested, we will move into the other things, the other animations, the other artwork you did. We're certainly curious to see it, but we're going to be far more curious to look at that other stuff if we've already identified this person as a candidate, as a potential candidate. So yeah, maybe that's a simple way to approach it. Maybe a more complex way is to, how you really, what you're doing is you're telling a story, and how you present that story to the hiring managers is a challenging one, because you don't really know necessarily what they're looking for. For a small studio like us, you can know that you're talking to the people making the games, right? Like, we don't have an HR department, we don't have a acquisition manager. We're not using recruiters. I actually, not that I have a problem with recruiters, but they don't necessarily, like, at this stage in our development, I don't see any value in them. I really like to just do it myself and talk to people myself. But yeah, is like, I guess this is maybe a bit more nuanced, but is ask yourself, what is the story that I'm telling these people about myself? And that's quite a bit of effort for a single individual company you're applying for. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you really see yourself succeeding at that organization, and you're really excited to work there, I would really put that time into crafting that story. And when I say story, it's not just your email. It's when they click on that link, what's the first thing they see? What's the second thing they see? Yeah.
So I'm gonna plus one that, and like you just said, it may seem like a lot of time to invest into a single company and a single application, but what we've just heard here is that there are candidates that are doing it, right?
Yes.
So if
Right.
Stephane here is receiving 100 applications, and 15 of them are putting in this extra work, those 15 individuals, their applications, they're going to rise to the top. So if we're not putting in the work, somebody else is, and they are then improving their chances at success in their applications.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really good point, is you do have to consider who you're applying against. It's really is that's really important as well. So yeah, thanks for adding that, Nate.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to combine two questions from the audience. And there were some people wondering what more of like the expectations were for your project manager job opening, and then also for the game developer job opening that you had. If you could just probably elaborate a bit more like you did with the pixel artist position.
So sorry, you were asking what we're looking for, or how we
What the expectations are for
what the
those
expectations
roles.
are. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So the developer role is, by the way, I'd like to add this. I actually think that our job descriptions, we try to be, again, it kind of comes from this commitment to be inclusive. I don't like writing things in there like we need 5 years and 2 launch titles, because I don't care about that stuff. I don't want to shut the door on super talented people because they don't see those numbers in their, in their resume. But the sort of the counter to that is, we're not being clear then necessarily with our expectations. So we're still trying to learn how to do this properly. We are looking for a more senior developer. We're always open to juniors. Our last developer we hired, we wanted to hire somebody who was a senior. We ended up hiring somebody who'd never worked at a studio fresh out of college because we were just really impressed with them. And they're such a great team member. So even though I'm like, we're hiring a senior, that's kind of the decision, I'm still open to being impressed by a junior. But it's challenging because that any junior who's applying is going to be having to, contend with the fact that we're also getting more senior people who have a lot of experience. And if that's where we're leaning, it makes it even more difficult. But for the project manager role, we actually are far more open to someone who's less experienced, or maybe has experience outside of the game industry, but they're really committed to developing themselves as a project manager. And that role is I don't think it's necessarily, I don't think it's articulated. I can't remember. I don't know, Nate, if you remember, but I can't remember if I wrote in the job description that we would consider juniors for that. But we certainly would. And we actually haven't gotten to replying to any of the people who have applied to project manager yet. We're actually just starting to review those. We've just been really busy, but our commitment is that we at least send an email to everybody who has applied. And then the last thing I'll say is, I do think this is written in there. I don't know exactly how it's worded off the top of my head, but our preference is that we find somebody who could be local. So if they're already living in BC or in Canada, that might be seen as a positive, but that doesn't stop us. We're like, I think like of the 15 or dozen, I think it's like a dozen pixel artists that we've reached out to, and we're going to be scheduling interviews. I think only 2 or 3 of them are in Canada. The rest are all over. So it's not like a huge preference. We personally love working with each other. Something I didn't share around our systems is we really do have a great way of operating and working together, that anyone can work from home at any moment in time. It doesn't disrupt our workflow. But I can maybe share about that in a little bit. If anybody's been on our Discord, they may actually already know a little bit about how we work. But yeah, so I guess what I'm saying is, although we love working together and being able to come in the studio and hang out together and stuff like that, not everybody on our team is local. We do have people who are remote and prefer to do that and prefer to work from home, and we're open to that for these positions. So for the developer, more senior though, and for the project manager, juniors is actually maybe something we're focusing on. So
Okay. For the roles that you're looking for someone more senior, what kind of level of experience would you say that would be?
Yeah. Well, we have two projects going right now, and I didn't share that at the beginning of this, but one of our projects is an open world role playing game. It's quite contemporary in its game mechanics, meaning, from a UI usability standpoint, it's quite modern, and the game mechanics themselves are fairly innovative. Although it's kind of retro inspired in a way, it is a pixel art game, but it's a very contemporary pixel art game. I guess it's a kind of like a mix of retro inspiration and modern and innovative systems. But the other game is a player versus player card battle game, and we actually did just share this as well on our Discord, sort of for the first time yesterday. There's a couple videos that were released in our fireside chat, but that is, so they're both in Unity, and we don't plan to leave Unity anytime soon. So a developer who has Unity experience is absolutely an ideal candidate. If they have more experience in 2D, that's actually really good for us at this moment in time. I'm not saying we won't work on 3D games in the future. It's just that we're going to be working on World of Anterra, which is our open world role playing game, for another year plus, and we're looking for a developer who can support that project as well as the player versus player card game. There is a good chance that we'll hire two developers. We want to hire, so the player versus player card game is a work for hire project. We're super excited about it because it's really a unique card experience, and that is going to be, we're at least going to be working on it for another 6 months. Anybody that we hire, though, I will say this: we don't want to hire freelancers. That's not really our preference. We want to hire a full-time salary position, and we want to keep those people. Even if the player versus player card game stops getting worked on in 6 months, we want those developers to stay with us, and we want to continue working on exciting projects. Whether we do another work for hire or not is not clear, but most likely it'll be our own projects going forward. So now, developers work, if you have your own portfolio and your own projects, we would be looking for, polished gameplay, examples of polished gameplay. From a developer standpoint, it's one thing to see prototypes that, that maybe are a bit rough around the edges, but it's another thing to see what we would consider to be polished mechanics, and polished from a player experience standpoint. So, not a lot of developers are necessarily animators, but this is a situation where if you've worked on a professional team, it's great, because then you have some professional work to do and you can clearly identify, hey, I worked on this feature and here's what it looks like. But if you haven't necessarily worked on a larger scale project with team members and you're more like an indie or an individual developer, I would definitely recommend connecting with some artists and animators who can help you polish the presentation of your work. Because, I think, like, I'm really big on visuals, and I understand that some developers in the audience may be kind of rolling their eyes, like, I don't do animations, I'm not an artist. And it's not really so much about that. I mean, when you talk about polished game mechanics, or like even just a button, does the button make sound? Does it animate in and out smoothly? Does it fit in and integrate with the rest of the buttons in the UI on the screen? These are things that we would want to see even in a developer's application. And so, in terms of like the scope or years, there's a lot of range in there. If you could have 5-6 years experience and be a very well-established senior developer, or you could have, maybe only 1 year experience at a studio, but you have like 4 years or 3 years behind you, including your school of like great side projects that you've worked on. I guess we're just looking for enough work that when we look at your portfolio, we see enough work that we can say to ourselves that this person is an experienced developer, and we would love to talk to him, get to know more. So I don't know if I did a good job answering that question.
I think you did a great job.
we're at the hour. How are you doing on time?
I'm good. Yeah, I've anticipated going over, so we're totally fine. And if anybody wants to stick around past 2 o'clock and continue, I would love to answer more questions.
Okay, great.
Okay, this kind of goes off the previous questions, but we had some people who, there's the on the job applications, it says that for, if you wanted to, you could be remote or in Canada. And so there were questions about for those that are maybe non-Canadians, but who would like to move to Canada, would you guys be able to sponsor work visas?
Yeah, yeah, we would. I mean, like for a small studio like ours, it puts a little more pressure on us. However, for the right candidate, we would. So I'll give you an example. Someone reached out a while ago, and they reached out to us. I can't remember if I think maybe somebody forwarded them to me. They were actually a pixel artist from the Ukraine, and they were desperate to get out. This was before the war started. And and it was probably 3 to 4 weeks before the actual conflict started. But he reached out and he was super talented, and I talked to him like, hey, we have this person, they're really talented and they want to get to Ukraine, but we're going to have to like invest in helping this person come over. And the team were like, let's do it. And so we made them an offer, and they ended up turning us down because they wanted to stay closer to their country, and I think they got a job in Spain. But we were absolutely ready to do that. And we have it like, in there's a lot of the game industry here in BC is quite well connected. So, there's a lot of game studios that you guys know that I'm friends with, or at least communicate with the founders. And I go to them for advice and support. One of them is, Jason, the founder of Clay Entertainment, just to name drop.
Yeah.
And he's, I can go down to the office and sit there and have a chat with him, and he'll give me his advice and expertise and link me to the people who I need, who can help me. So in that situation, if I need to bring somebody here, since we don't have an HR department, we obviously need to make sure that we're supporting that person properly. And so we would reach out to one of the consultants in our neighborhood and make sure that that's done properly, but we can certainly do that.
Awesome. So another question from Zach. He asks, could you please share about the challenges that you face related to the recruitment in a relatively small size game studio?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's challenging for sure. I shared earlier that I hoped to get female candidates applying for a game design position. I think I got one. I went to the colleges, portfolio shows, and there was none. There was no female graduates, and the only female graduates that were coming were getting snapped up by the big companies. Because those companies have diversity initiatives, and they have way more resources, and it's probably just much more appealing. I think at the time we were actually working in my basement still. We now have an office, but I had like a big space. It was a beautiful space. Like everybody loved working there. There was like 7 workstations and a separate washroom, and the back door went into the backyard where I had chickens and my dog was back there. And like that's just where we worked for like years, and now we're in an office. But it's difficult to recruit when that's your environment, right? As much as you share that, hey, it's wonderful working here, we're great people, our projects are exciting, these candidates are applying at other jobs as well, and they have to consider you versus them. And when you're just a little guy, it's or a little shop, it definitely can be a challenge. So, I think we're at a point where our project that we're working on, like we have a working demo of the game, and it is really exciting. We can show it to people and get them excited. I think there's a big shift that's been happening where it's a lot of less about the money, because I think salaries are going up really high. And I don't think people aren't necessarily, I mean, juniors is a bit different, but more senior people aren't really worried necessarily about the salary. They're more worried about who they get to work with and what projects they work on. So I feel like we're more competitive now, which is really good, but it's definitely been a challenge.
Okay, thank you for the answer. Let's see. let's see. This is a question from Negaspace, and they are asking, do you have any advice for artists from the TV or film industry who want to apply to indie game studios like yours?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, you know, there was someone who applied who wanted to be in project management, and they have, I believe they worked in like construction or something like that. And on the surface, that is like, you know, that seems like not great, but or not relatable necessarily. I mean, anybody, well, you manage people, you can, you know, manage people, but being a project manager of a game and or software in general is very different than being like a store manager in retail or something like that. However, what struck me with this individual's email was how authentic it felt and how transparent it felt. And and through that authentic nature of the writing and the transparency, I saw the passion and drive, the desire to get an opportunity to prove that they could be a successful project manager in the game industry and start to gain that experience. Um, so I mean, this goes for anyone applying, period, but I definitely think, you know, showing humility and authenticity in your communication, if you're trying to transition from one industry to the other, you want to kind of do both. You want to show like, hey, here's some of the threads that I can carry over from this industry to the game industry, and I can see how these threads are going to be, you know, can be woven into a successful career. But here are the things that I'm missing and I'm really eager to learn about, and here are the things I'm doing to learn about that. So yeah, it's like, it's a bit of a balancing act where I think there's always like, one of the things I used to say to people, young people who were like, you know, didn't know what their career is, I was always like, try and get some management experience. Like, try to get, if you're working as a bartender or a waiter, like, try and get that management experience, because that management experience is going to, you know, transcend industries and become, you're going to be able to paint that as a valuable, you know, component to your experience when applying outside of the hospitality industry, for instance. So for you in film and animation, I would really identify where you think, for instance, here's a good example. You may have worked with some software engineers being in film and animation. Um, and if you have worked with some engineers, like maybe they were just tools engineers for animators, or maybe they're, you know, tool engineers for some of the film components or editing. But if you've worked with those people, you know, mention that and cite that work, because in the game industry, you know, we kind of, all of our work kind of revolves around the software development component. um, and so if you can connect that somehow, that would be really great. But that's more like, what are those threads, what are the things, what's the experience that I've learned that I think is going to be really valuable in the game industry, and and bring that into your conversation, whether it's through the email or cover letter, and also be authentic and honest and humble about what it is you need to learn to be successful, or what you think you need to learn to be successful. And I think that mixture could be really successful and help you transition. I don't know, Nate probably has lots of advice in that area.
I do, but I will just co-sign. To really appreciate you mentioning, you know, things like, even like, you know, working at a restaurant or bartending or whatever it might be, and amplifying and validating that experience,
Yes.
because it is extremely valuable. And
Mhm.
I often tell people here, you know, even, you know, one is like, do I put the experience on my resume, or do I even go out and get it, right? If it's not related to games. And certainly there's a lot of job descriptions that we see that, one of the requirements is, you know, experience within the game industry. And what did we just talk about, you know, earlier? The differences, the variety in, you know, backgrounds, the diversity of perspectives is what makes a great team. And I look at, you know, when I'm building my teams, and certainly when I'm working in games, yes, I want some game experience on my team, but I don't want only game experience on my team, right? So I'm looking for other
Right.
people to augment, you know, that team with their unique perspective and their outsider's perspective and new learnings and insights, you know, from other industries that we can bring into, you know, our team and our business to make it stronger and better. I look at those, as pluses, right? Your outsider's perspective, like that's your superpower. That's the thing that you're going to really bring to the table. We don't need people to repeat, the things that we already know or the things that we're already doing. We need, your unique perspective and skill set, and knowledge. So thank you again for, kind of just plus oneing that. And then, it's not just enough to get the experience. It is also, as you're gaining that experience, looking at what you want to do in the future, and then trying to find ways in that role to build some of the skills, flex some of the muscles, grow some of the muscles that you would need, for those future roles. So every role usually has an opportunity to kind of move beyond, the scope of the role, take on some additional projects, things of that nature. That's where I have in the past. Not taken and volunteered for every project, but really volunteered for the ones that, obviously were interesting to me, in fields and in areas where, I wanted to grow or establish a network. But it was all kind of in support of um, creating the person, mold myself into the person that was going to be able to get that next job, that was on my chosen career path. That's awesome. Again, thank you for plus oneing it, because not a lot of people do, and we need more people validating, all of your outside game industry experience as being, not detrimental. Again, it's your superpower. It's actually your competitive advantage if you
Yeah,
position it correctly.
exactly. It's how you. I mean, like I said, you're telling a story, and it's how that fits into your story. But actually, we should acknowledge the person who asked that question, because they're the one that started this. So thank you for that question.
Mhm.
Yes, awesome. I'm going to kind of jump in, sorry, Shelby,
You're
and combine
okay.
a couple of questions here. So, um, working at, I guess, work life at uh, 81 Monkeys, Sophie has a question here around advice for a leader that is interested in kind of project management or game direction, and some of the key things that you do at 81 Monkeys to maintain healthy relationships with your team. That includes proper delegation of tasks, making sure everything remains on schedule. And then Kawa, right below that, also asks about managing collaboration with every member defining their own schedules at 81 Monkeys. So, how do you do project management? How do you communicate amongst each other on the team?
Um, yeah, those are great questions. I leadership is really important to me, and I don't, and so my relationship to leadership is a bit different than maybe like the textbook or typical um, thing, and um, I am really here to be in service of my team, and I work for them, and this is a really important distinction that I operate from. And it's not that I. It's the funny thing is it's not like I just declared this and that's what I then pretend to operate from. Obviously, I founded the company. I'm the one who deals with the burden of running a company, and you know, and I need to be responsible for that and honest about that. And however, what gets me up in the morning is my ability to support and keep my word to my team. And this is something I talk to them about a lot. We've had challenges over the last few years, and when we have challenges that impacts the team, that's the thing that keeps me up at night, and that I sort of worry about. So that for me is a really important distinction as a leader, is that I'm here in service of them, and if they're succeeding, I'm succeeding. There's no world in which I can succeed where they're not. And so it doesn't make sense to just simply have these expectations. And if I have these expectations and I'm telling people what to do, and I'm pointing out when they're not meeting my expectations, that somehow makes me a successful leader, it's not true. I need to have them succeed. And so that means I have to constantly be going back and saying, what am I doing here that's impacting them negatively? What could I be doing better? And actually having those conversations with them. So, um, like I guess how that shows up in terms of healthy relationships is I do have to be responsible for the communication that happens around me. Um, I've taken some leadership training courses and I've taken communication workshops. And one of the most powerful things I've learned in the communication training that I've been a part of is that I am 100% responsible for the communication that happens around me. That's a pretty bold statement. And what it means is that it just means that I can transform communication in any moment in time. So if somebody's saying something to me that I find, upsetting or off-putting or whatever, but I'm listening from the standpoint of I'm 100% responsible for this communication, then the first place that I look is how am I interpreting this person's words that is making me get upset or frustrated or feeling off-put. And when I look there, often I realize like, oh, I'm adding a bunch of stuff here that they didn't necessarily say. And I can then transition my own communication in that direction without sort of putting the onus on the individual.
Yeah.
And so when I hear people talking around me and they're having some challenges or breakdowns, I always come from the standpoint of like, how can I contribute to this conversation in a meaningful way? And I really work hard on, like like conflict's important. This isn't about avoiding conflict. I think conflict in a game studio, is kind of important in a certain way. If people aren't coming to certain conversations with passion and drive, and if that's never happening, and then you're probably not making the best decisions. But at the same time, I have to be, I have to be committed to the communication of the others on the team in such a way that I'm really just supporting them and being effective in how they communicate. So it's a challenge. It's an ongoing challenge. And as the team gets bigger, it's going to become more important on the other kind of quote unquote leaders at 81Monkeys to kind of carry that flame with me. So I would be looking for a project manager who has a communication style that, is authentic. I would definitely want somebody who presents a certain level of self-awareness. I feel when I'm interviewing them that they understand the things that they know they don't know, and they understand the things they don't know they don't know, and that they, communicate in a way that has them continue to learn and grow themselves. So I think that's a really important aspect.
Yeah, I'm big on that authenticity. When I'm in interviews, if I'm being interviewed, certainly I'm going to have confidence in the things that I think I'm actually uniquely good at. Like, here's what I bring to the table. Here's where you're going to get a lot of productivity and efficiency and great results. And then I will just own the things that I'm not good at. And one is like, if this is detrimental, if me being deep red in this skill means that I can't do the job, then you probably shouldn't hire me, right, to do the job. And I probably don't want to do the job because I won't be able to do it well. So that's one aspect. The other would be uh, is it something that I can learn or you could teach me, right? Because I am looking to learn in every new role that I take. So I want to lean into some of my strengths, but I want to be challenged with each new role. So I want to be pretty green in some areas, and that's what the company is going to give me. That's the opportunities that I'm looking for to be leveled up by the company. So you just have to be confident in yes, you could deliver high quality results through your strengths, and that you just own up to some of your current weaknesses. And again, those aren't always detrimental. Companies know this. They want to hire people that are actually going to level up and grow in the role, because that typically means when you're challenged, you're a little bit more fulfilled. You're going to be happier, more satisfied. You're probably going to stick around longer. Those are good things to have, to give employees, to give candidates growth opportunities in their roles.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Nate, is I mean, this goes back to the previous conversation, but identifying what how this company is going to contribute to your development. When we hire people, we want it to look for how we can support this person's development. Like, when we ask that question, what are you good at? What are you not good at? We're really trying to identify, like, okay, what are the areas that if this person comes and works with us, that we can start to support them right away and bring them value? And what are the areas that we can give them room to bring value to us right away? And I think that's something that applicants can answer for themselves when they're applying for a job, is like, what do I think I'm going to learn by working at this company, and find an opportunity to sort of put that into your communication.
Thanks, Stephane. We're 20 minutes over. I'm going to put us at a hard stop in 10 minutes, so half past the hour. Sorry, we're not going to get to every question, but I am going to. I've got 3 more. I'm going to group 2, and then so 2 more questions for you, and then we'll wrap up.
Sounds good.
Great. So one, there's a couple of individuals that are mentioning things like anxiety, mental health issues. Another individual with arthritis, and really wondering how. Looking for some insight on how you might suggest they best go about kind of representing themselves, again, being authentic in an interview, representing themselves in interviews where it might not be so detrimental, to their opportunities to be considered and be hired.
That is, man, these are great questions. Thank you, Nate. And thank you for whoever asked that question. I have, experienced my challenges around anxiety in my life, and really to the point where, it's difficult to function. And this is something I still deal with. Well, first I'll share really quickly. I had an individual reach out, and I'm going to try to avoid any identifiable characteristics about this person, but they applied for a job when I was hiring, and there's something they did in the communications with me that really blew me away. They were very authentic. They were very open. I felt like, hey, this is somebody that I can communicate with and support, and is going to be receptive to, my leadership style. They ended up flying out there. They were already planning to travel this part of the world, and so they arranged to meet me for coffee. I met them, and when I met them for coffee, I guess through my kind of acknowledgement about their candidness with me, they opened up and shared that, recent diagnoses of that. When they said it, I think most employees would be like, oh, I can't hire this person. Like, that's potential. The diagnosis was around mental health, and it was such that I think I can't see any HR person that I know of that would hire somebody after they share this. And I was like, I left that meeting, and I sort of kind of was stressed about this, because I'm like, this person flew out and I've now met them, and they've shared this with me, and am I crazy to want to hire this person still? And I hired them, and they're not working with me anymore, but they're now thriving in the game industry and doing just a great job. And I'm so happy that I had an opportunity to be a stepping stone for them, and give them that opportunity. So, that's my own personal experience around, being open to that. I think it's definitely a challenge when you're a candidate and wanting to express yourself authentically. You don't know who you're talking with, and you may be applying at a studio that, for instance, mentions things like they hire neurodivergent people, for instance, but then, like, how much do you express that side of you? It's definitely a challenge. I don't, yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, you really do want to be honest, but you have to also be honest with yourself about how you have to be responsible for how it's going to be received. And that can show up in a number of ways. It can show up in what you say, but more often it shows up in how you say it. And so I wish I had a better answer. I think this is something that I actually want to really do a good job in answering, and I'm a bit nervous about, you know, not giving this answer the thoughtfulness that I'm committed to giving it. So I would like to actually follow up maybe with Nate and talk more about this. I'm wondering, Nate, if you have any thoughts and feedback on that. I'm sure this is a question that you've had numerous times.
One, in terms of following up, please feel free, or even come back to the event chat here and just, if
Yeah,
you
I would
want to
love to.
type up and drop a response.
Mm-hmm.
If video is easier, record a Loom or something like that. Feel
Sure.
free. Yeah, this is. I'd love Catherine or Shelby to chime in on this as well. But because I think my perspective obviously is going to be very narrow here. But this is one where, again, I think authenticity is incredibly important. And when we're applying for jobs. So I want you, and you should want to be, authentically in your job interviews, right? In a lot of interviews, in interviews for relationships, right? Let's be our authentic selves and put ourselves out there, because if we play a role as somebody that we aren't, and then we enter that relationship or that work relationship, we are then forced to continue to play that role, right? Uh, and at some point you're either going to get discovered or get tired of playing that role, and you're going to be unhappy kind of playing that role. So I would be looking for people to again be authentic, really understanding that some companies are going to say no as a result. But I would look at those declined um, results as is kind of the blessing, right? In that you are more likely to be entering into a space that was going to be unsupportive of you, right? That wasn't going to be able to accommodate your needs. That wasn't going to be inclusive, to who you are, and as a result, likely to be um, you're less likely to be supported, less likely to be provided, the resources that you need to be successful in the role, and then as a result, you're less likely to be successful. And then that just turns into kind of a negative experience for all involved. So on the surface, that would be kind of my response. But I think, like you, that's staying very surface level and really not doing, things justice. I would also say, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Um, I think that's a privileged position for me to be able to take, right? And to be able to
Right.
suggest. And not everybody has their needs met to the level where they're in a privileged position to be able to stand firm like that. And sometimes we do have to make some sacrifices and compromises to meet our needs. So I would create space for that as well.
Nate, I think that the key to this is um, there are enough jobs out there, and
Yeah.
Nate pointing out that you want to put yourself in a position where you could be yourself at work is really important. I shared it as a commitment at 81Monkeys. We want people to be their authentic selves. It's one thing for me to say that. It's another thing. It's not really necessarily up to me. It's up to the individual to make that choice and to be comfortable doing that. But when you're interviewing with a company, if you feel like you need to hide who you are, that's definitely a big red flag for you. That should be a big red flag for you. And the last thing you want to do is put yourself in a position where you can't be yourself, because I mean, the burnout rate is tremendous, and it can have a really huge impact on you. So yeah, that's a really good point, Nate. Thank you.
All right. So I have
Yeah.
one last question I wanted to get to
Okay.
from Sophie, which was, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about your game. So the World of Anterra.
Oh, yes.
So Sophie asks, I saw it's a non-linear game with a world that keeps going without you. How's that done? Is it done with scheduling each character's actions or AI driven, etc.? I'm very interested in how a living game like this works. So tell us a little bit more about the World of Anterra as you kind of address that question as well.
Um, so, well, World of Anterra is an open world pixel art game, and one of the things that we knew we wanted to do was we wanted to combine pixel art with life, essentially. So, I mean, that's really simple. When you're animating something, how do you bring those pixels to life and make them feel lifelike? And I don't mean like, I mean more in an artistic way when I say that. Another thing is we're very interested in procedural systems at 81Monkeys. We use them all the time, and we've developed for World of Anterra number of procedural systems already, but even going back to previous games and just even developing like a bot to play Sudoku Scramble was a really interesting challenge for us. And I ended up writing the code for that bot myself. I don't do development anymore just because I don't have time to do it. But even though I love doing it, I just, I don't bring value to the team if I write code, and I think they're grateful I'm not doing it anymore. But that writing that AI, that's not AI, really just a bot, but we had to write it in a way, or I had to write it in a way that would have it play like a human being, because we wanted it to stub in online. Because when you make a player versus player game and you're new, you're just not going to have enough players, and you don't want players sitting in your matchmaker for 2 minutes or 3 minutes waiting to be matched. You want them to sit in there for 10 seconds. So you prioritize finding a human. If they don't find a human, you match them against a bot. If any of you download Sudoku Scramble right now, you will certainly get paired against a bot in the first few games, but ongoingly it'll be like some percentage of humans and then some percentage of bots. We always prioritize humans over, but we knew we had to develop a bot that made sense to the opponent. So when the opponent saw the sort of decision-making process of this bot, because Sudoku Scramble has some nuances to how you play, we had to make those decisions reasonable for the human watching. And there are a lot of challenges around that. And so those types of opportunities for us as a game studio to learn about making these types of systems have really come, that's really what we're bringing to World of Anterra. So our world is more, it's less about the individual NPCs and them living lives, and it's more about the systems and how those systems, how we bring life to those systems. So I'll give you a really good example, and then I'll get back just to the NPCs and how they live their lives. But in a lot of RPGs like ours, like open world RPGs, there's a whole bunch of crap you can pick up and sell, right? You can, any short sword from any combat, you can pick up a short sword, you can go sell it. And the way that the game designers balance those systems is it doesn't bring life to owning a short sword and selling it to a merchant. What they do is they, like, you might be able to buy a short sword for, let's say, 200 gold, but you only sell it for like 5 gold or maybe even 2 gold. And the reason the designers do that is because they have to balance it. They don't want you to be able to pick every short sword up in the whole game and make tons of money and farm that. Even though when you sell it, you feel like this is ridiculous. Like, it sells for 250, but I can only sell it for 2 gold, or I can buy it for 250, but it always feels kind of off. So what we've done, as an example, is our merchants actually have a bit of a behind the scenes economy. What that means is you bring them a short sword. Maybe the first few short swords you bring, they're excited to buy them because they don't have very many short swords to sell, or maybe they don't have any short swords to sell. So they'll buy them for more money. Maybe they'll buy them for 50 gold, and then they'll sell them for 200. But as you keep bringing them short swords, they'll be like, whoa, we don't need any more. So I won't pay as much, or I just won't buy it from you at all. So this is an example of like how we can kind of bring this life. Another thing is, so now going back just to the NPCs, is our NPCs, like in a game like Skyrim, have a day-night life cycle. They go to work, they stop for lunch, they eat dinner, and they go to bed. And every once in a while you'll catch them doing hobbies. They might fish, or they might play an instrument and stuff like that. But we're just not stopping there. We're also bringing procedural systems into this as well. So I think on our Discord, somebody mentioned it being AI. I don't like throwing the term AI at everything, because often it's like, things aren't all AI, even though they might seem like it to a user. It's like a collection of procedural systems. Now, if there's like memory and learning, then I think I would be comfortable calling it AI. But so here's an example of procedural systems. So maybe the player is walking through town and drops something on the ground, right? They're like cleaning out their inventory before they head out on an adventure. And rather than sell it to the store, they're just going to dump it on the ground. So they drop that short sword that the merchant didn't want to buy. They drop it on the ground. And as they start to walk away, an NPC who's in the area who sees the short sword deviates from their daily rhythm and walks over and picks up the short sword and maybe says something about it, and then heads back off among their things. So we want that, like those opportunities to present themselves, where the player sees things they didn't expect to happen, that feels like, this is actually a living world. And I don't like this is something we're going to work hard at. I don't think we have to bend over backwards though to like make the player be able to believe that they're in a living world. And it's not about pulling wool over anyone's eyes or anything like that. It's really just about like making it feel organic as much as we can. And so that's just more of our commitment than we're really doing something super unique that's never been done before. Where it ends up, I don't really know. Like we have NPCs in the game, we have them moving about. We don't have the procedural systems all in there yet. That's something we're going to be developing for, and we're probably going to start on that system in like maybe 4 or 5 months or so. We'll see. But we're super excited to get to that point. We also want, like, for instance, traveling merchants to have a schedule that has them leave the towns, and guards that travel the roads outside the towns and things like that. So we're going to be really, this is something we're going to be working hard at, and it's really important to us. So
That sounds very, very cool. I'm very excited to see more of it. So my last question to wrap this up is that where can we find you and your studio in the internet? Like, do you have any Twitter website that you would like to share so that we can follow and support? I know someone in chat just asked for your Discord server, so feel free to share it in the event chat.
yeah, absolutely. And that's a great question. So social media isn't something that I've never really been great at. Um, I'm involved in indie game communities, in a lot of indie game groups on Facebook. I really enjoy participating and chatting in. I'm involved in multiple, discords. In terms of 81 Monkeys, we do have a website, but really where you'd want to connect with us is on Discord. I definitely think we need to branch out, and we need to be, have a Facebook page and a Twitter and stuff like that. We do have Twitter, but we just don't use it for anything. What's magical about our Discord though is we actually work on Discord. So when you log into our Discord and you scroll down, you'll see in the last section there's a list of audio channels, and you'll see us all logged into those audio channels during the day. And the reason we do that, we actually log into those, so you can't hop in the channels, but you can just see us in them. The reason we do that is because we actually treat those channels as our like our cubicles. So, and this is just goes towards our systems and processes. But if somebody's in the office and there's people on the desk beside them, you obviously don't need to talk to them through Discord. You just turn around and talk to them, but you stay logged into that channel and muted, because if somebody who's not in the office wants to have the same experience of turning their chair and asking you a question, they can do that in our Discord. So we just go and hop into somebody else's channel and say, hey, Ryan, do you have a minute? Can I just ask you a question? And Ryan will say, unmute and say, yeah, what's up? And then we have that real-time communication, and I move on. It's so much more effective than writing a Slack message and waiting for him to see it, or he doesn't see it. And so we actually rely on the real-time verbal communication, and of course then we have screen sharing and everything else. And so we work on Discord every day, and so the people in our community can see us there. And I encourage all my team members to participate in our Discord, to have these communication. I feel like we're really committed to sharing our work openly and transparently, like I'm doing today with everyone here. So on our Discord is the same thing. We're trying to have a fireside every Wednesday, where we just get, maybe it's just me, or usually it's me and 2 or 3. Sometimes it's everyone on the whole team will be on, depending on the topic and people's interest in having a conversation about it. I actually think, ironically enough, I think our next one on Wednesday might be about AI in games and in World of Anterra. So it's kind of funny that the last question was about that. But so sometimes on Wednesday it might just be 15 minutes, or sometimes it might be an hour and a half. So it kind of depends. But But it's a great place if you're interested in learning about indie game studios and learning about the work that we do, or just excited about World of Anterra and want to stay up on the things that we share. There's a lot of content there. We share quite openly about the work that we're doing on the game. So yeah, in terms of the Discord link, I can share that.
Is that the World of
Neat.
Anterra link? I think I grabbed that for
Yes.
you. Yeah.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah.
Cool.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Awesome.
Well,
This was so much fun.
yeah, thank you so much for like taking the time to hang
I
out with us
really,
today.
yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Thank
I have to
you.
say that it's very inspiring to have people who want to hear what you have to say. So I find it really motivating, and whenever I get these opportunities, it's really inspiring just to be able to support people. And so thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Yeah, there's so much incredible stuff there. We're gonna pull out a ton of quotes and then hopefully use them to share and influence and nudge people to not only improve themselves as candidates and employees, but a lot of good stuff in there for hiring managers and studio leads as well. So really awesome stuff. Thanks again.